Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. This is the Leadership Toolkit, as you know, your definitive leadership growth podcast. So it's the opportunity, every once in a while, I have this opportunity to dive in and review some things. You know, each week I have interviews from multiple awesome leaders from all different verticals of business. And we talk about wins, we talk about losses, we talk about what's helped to make them successful and propel them forward in business, whether it be entrepreneurship or management and managing direct teams or leading in general. Like leading falls into the ether sometimes, right? And this week is no different. I'm going to be sharing with you 5 leadership pitfalls to avoid that I've learned from interviewing all of these awesome leaders from all over the globe. And one of the things to understand is, as I'm sitting and talking with leaders, we lean in and we talk about what the wins are and what's successful and what are good characteristics that leaders have. And we often get into that space. And it's easy when you may be tuning in and either watching or listening to the show to hear this and go, oh man, that person is so awesome. They've made it so far. And we look at sort of the shiny exterior. And that's why usually the second half of the show, I really try and get into, well, what are some things that you've failed at? What have been the struggles? What are the pitfalls or the walls that you've hit, so that as either if you're an existing leader tuning in, or if you are somebody that maybe has been in leadership for a while, or someone looking to move into a leadership role, you have an opportunity to avoid those things because we learn from others. You know, it's easy if I tell you, hey, this is a mistake, don't do that, then you can avoid it. It's like, for me, I'm a dad, as most of you know. And so as we're raising kids, you know, you talk about, we all talk about the analogy, sort of the hot stove, right? Hey, don't touch that. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. And inevitably your children learn over time, like, hey, that's a bad thing, I want to avoid that. And so that's one of the things we wanted to talk about today in the show is, what are 5 things that I've learned that are cross-referenced many times, all different verticals of business, whatever, whether it is in the automotive industry or marketing, or it may be in tech or AI. That's a hot space right now. And so let's get into talking about that today. Also, just so I don't forget, each week we do this live Wednesday at 12:05 p.m. Mountain Time, 2:05 Eastern. And I would encourage you, you can tune in multiple channels, but certainly if you go to spotify.theleadershiptoolkit.com or youtube.theleadershiptoolkit.com to catch any past episodes. We've done just at 100 episodes now. And so I'm really excited to be able to share a lot of this wisdom and insight with you. So let's get into it. And I think what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share all 5, and then we're going to sit and dissect them for a few minutes. So the 5 things that I have seen across many industries, many leaders, different personalities, the 5 things that I think leaders need to avoid to grow their businesses the most. Number 1 is a lack of clear communication. Number 2 is a failure to delegate. Number 3 is avoiding difficult conversations. It's something that none of us like. Number 5, that's number 3, avoiding difficult conversations. 4 is lack of accountability. And 5 is having a resistance to change. So let's dive into it. First off, lack of communication. And one of the things that we want to talk about, and I have notes just like I always take every week for everybody else, I sat and typed mine up. Communication. What is communication? Because it's easy to say, well, it's a lack of communication. They didn't communicate with me well. One of the things to understand is communication is the process of exchanging information. It's a dialogue. How am I communicating with you? And so often leaders believe they are a good communicator. Well, I think I'm a good communicator. I think I do this thing. And well, I told you, or I emailed you, or I texted you, but that's in a channel that we are communicating outward. Right. And so I looked up some of the definitions, right? Communication, process of exchanging information, ideas, thoughts, feelings between individuals. And it can be verbal, nonverbal, written, digital. And so the key to this is it's the exchange. It's more than just, hey, I'm going to tell you this thing, but then you have to come back and ask, what did you hear? What did you gain from that? How are you understanding what it is that I just conveyed to you? And so it's not a one-way street. It's very much a two-way street and it doesn't matter what specific area of business we're talking about. If we're trying to communicate processes, we're trying to communicate goals, we're trying to communicate training or learning. it's really key to first get the communication out in the channel that you are good at sharing. I try to do the definition without containing the same word. It's important to get that information out in a method that you are good at. And then to have the people that you are communicating with either repeat it back to you, type it back to you, respond back in some manner so that you know that they're hearing what it is that you're saying. They're understanding what it is that you're saying. They're seeing what it is that you are saying, right? We all communicate different ways, whether it be, visual, like it says here, nonverbal. So some people communicate through vision and seeing stuff. Yeah, hey, I need to see that and read it. Some can just hear it once and do it. Some need to gauge, how does that make me feel? And so that lack of clear communication, I'm having a tough time communicating communication. The lack of clear communication, I think, is one of the number one leadership pitfalls we experience. It's one of the toughest things that we go through. It leads to confusion. It leads to decreased productivity because people maybe are doing what they think you are asking of them, but then they're not able to effectively perform in your eyes, right? Maybe. And so it's one of those things that we think we say one thing, and unfortunately it leads to something else entirely. And so those are the two key things that I see that come from that the most, is just simply you have confused people, and confused people won't stay with you. And you have a lack of productivity. People that are not producing, that are not hitting goals, that are not winning, they generally will not stay with you for long either. And so what's the solution to that? Well, you got to develop, like I said, I think I probably shared a bit of the solution to this before, but have those transparent communication channels and ensure that what your expectations are as a leader, ensure that what I am saying is actually what's being absorbed and heard. And so for me, and I would love to hear, if you're in the comments, whether you're listening in on Spotify, maybe later, or if you're here on YouTube, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Like, what are some things that you have done to ensure clear and well understood communication with your teams, because that's something that I think is so valuable. So the second one that I mentioned here is just a failure to delegate. And delegation is the process of assigning responsibility and authority to another person. And at its core, right? Delegation, I think so often leaders have some difficulty with delegation because we've got that thing, we have that piece that we need to be going after and doing. Well, I've got this thing that was assigned to me, or I have this task that needs to get done. And in a lot of situations, leaders and managers alike will say, well, I have the ability to get that done at what my view is 100%. And so we have a tough time giving that responsibility and authority. And, one of the things is when we go through that, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to assign this task to you. And then here's one of the big pitfalls. We don't truly delegate. Like, we tell somebody, oh yes, hey, we're going to have you, I'm going to give you the authority, I'm going to give you the autonomy for this. But then we show back up and we micromanage, right? That's one of the pitfalls I have in my notes here, is we end up micromanaging the person, or we micromanage the team, or we consistently check in. Or here's one: if they're not doing the thing, whatever the thing is, in just the manner that we would have done the thing, then we start to question, right? And we start to stifle their performance because we go, well, that's not how I would have done it. And I know people that are tuning into the show, hopefully you want to be a good leader, you want to help people grow. It's inadvertent. I know I've been guilty of that in the past, where I would assign something to somebody and then I'm constantly going back and checking that. And again, I was liking this like to parenting. We do that with our kids a lot. Like, we'll assign them, hey, you need to go clean your room. Hey, you need to go clean your room. Hey, you need to go clean your room. Okay, I'm listening. Or the living room, or whatever that task or that chore may be. We go in, and then they're in the process of doing that. I'm terrible at this with my son. To me, it's a good example. Hopefully it resonates with you. I go in and I say, hey, you need to do this. You need to clean the room. You need to clean the bathroom. But then he's not doing it in the manner that I would, right? It's like, well, first you dust off the counters and then you vacuum. And instead he's in there vacuuming and then doing, and there's something to be said about, okay, well, yeah, does the task still get done? Is it still cleaner than it was before? Yes. So then just let it happen. You need to allow people to learn and grow in their own right. And the same thing happens so often in our businesses, right? As a leader, I assign something to somebody and I say, hey, we're going to go in and we're going to do this thing. And I need you to, hit this goal or go to this place or produce this Excel spreadsheet, right? I'm not a fan of Excel spreadsheets, but we want them to produce this spreadsheet. And then the person goes and they may do the calculations manually and put the stuff in. And we're immediately injecting ourselves and saying, well, but what if you did it this way, or you wrote this different method, or you followed through this different way? And it's disheartening to the employee. It actually beats them down because they're like, well, if you're going to give me this thing, then just let me do it. Right? So what's the solution when we're talking about delegation? Assign responsibilities that are within their comfort zone. Assign responsibility, well, not necessarily their comfort zone, because you want to stretch them. I'm having this conversation with myself as I go. Assign responsibilities that are in their wheelhouse, I guess is a better way to say it. Something that you've seen that they have the ability to do, something that you've seen that it may stretch them a little bit and that align with their strengths, right? What is it that they're good at? And I can give them this thing and then pass off or delegate. Geez, some of these things that as I'm just thinking aloud, delegate these things to other people that also have strengths. And when you have 1, 2, 3, 5 people that you've delegated different tasks to that are working in their strength, that are working in their own light and in their own place, you're going to accomplish 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times more than you would trying to do it on your own. Because I think, so often as leaders, we try to, do all the things. We do. We try and accomplish all the stuff because we go, well, I can do that. But the reality is there are some things that I may be able to only accomplish at 70%. Whereas if I hand it off to someone else, they may be able to do it 80 or 85 or 90% or 100%, but certainly better than I could accomplish it on my own. But we'll never know that if you don't start playing to people's strength and you don't start assigning things to them and then taking your hands off the wheel and really letting them experience it. Let them call signals back to you. Yeah, set guardrails. Tell them, hey, you got to check in with me at the end of the day or check in with me at the end of the week, or let's have this communication on where we're headed and what we're doing. But I think it's so important to really empower people, and it fosters trust in an environment, it fosters innovation, and it allows people to truly grow. The third thing on my list today is just avoiding difficult conversations. And some of the notes that I have on this, first off, why do we avoid difficult conversations? What is a difficult conversation? Like you hear, that's almost become a buzzword, right? In leadership, we go, wow, we got to have these difficult conversations, and we got to be able to work this out. But the reality is there's a lot of difficult conversations in leadership and in business. And so those are simply they're discussions that involve sensitive, high stakes, emotionally charged topics, stuff that's uncomfortable, stuff that probably makes you uncomfortable as a leader, stuff that probably makes the person you're having the conversation with uncomfortable. There are things that certainly can be in the professional realm. And also sometimes for me, I really think the best leaders are the ones that do develop and foster a strong personal relationship with people. The person, who they are, when they're performing at their best because you have a genuine love and caring for that person, and not in a weird way, but just something that you've taken the time to learn who they are. You've taken the time to learn about their family and what are their real hopes and dreams, and how many kids do they have and what do they do on the weekends? Not because you're trying to leverage that later, but because you take a genuine interest in somebody and you care about them. And so often when you care about somebody, it can lead to these uncomfortable spaces where there's like, hey, there's this rift. I'm fearful of if I say this to this person, or I could crush their spirit, or it could be really uncomfortable. It may make them sad, or it may make them defensive, or it may make them angry. Those are the sort of things that I would define as difficult conversations. And so the pitfall in that, I think as leaders, so often we avoid just looking somebody in the eye and having that conversation. And so what happens is we sidestep it, right? It leads to unresolved conflicts. It leads to people not knowing where they're at. Where do I stand with my leadership? Because we're not willing to just say this. And that happens in families. It happens in, relationships with our spouses and our kids, our coworkers. It happens in all kinds of relationships because we temper ourselves and we go, well, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. And so I take a step back maybe, right? Because I think it would be hurtful or harmful. And it's one thing if you have that conversation in your head. Sometimes for me, I'll pray about it. Hey, if I'm gonna pray and have this conversation with God because I need to have this conversation with somebody else, how can I have that conversation tactfully and gracefully and out of genuine caring with the individual? Because if I don't, it's going to lead to, inevitably, this happens all the time. If I'm not willing to take a little bit of that risk and have a little bit of discomfort, so often when I'm looking at somebody and again, if I'm having this conversation out of caring, then it's going to lead to a toxic space. It'll lead to a toxic work environment. It'll lead to a toxic marriage. It'll lead to a toxic relationship with your children later in life because they're going to have all this unresolved stuff. It's like, well, I have all these things that I wanted to say or I should have said. And if you had just said that to me. And I'll give you an example when it comes to difficult conversations. I've been in, and I think we've all had these, been in business a long time. There are times sometimes, and for the business sense, right? For the sake of business leadership and management, we bring somebody on board. And have you ever done this? You bring somebody on and then you go, they're not a good fit. Not because they're not a good human, they're just not a good fit for the task or the role that you hired them for. And it's not a good space. But then something in us says, well, we want to make it work, and my background, as many of you know, is sales and marketing. So often you'll have somebody come into sales. Well, what are some key characteristics of sales? Most of the time you need somebody that's comfortable talking to people. You need somebody that is comfortable networking, that has good eye contact. You could go down a list of, well, what makes somebody good? You do want somebody that operates out of integrity and honesty. And so sometimes you'll get someone in that role that they're very uncomfortable when they're having a conversation with someone, they're just darting all over. They can't look somebody in the eye. Well, when you do that, it creates this false sense of not having integrity, right? And they may be a great person. It's just in an uncomfortable space or an uncomfortable situation. It's something that maybe they're not good at. And so we try to, let's say we hire someone into a role and they're not a good fit for the role. So often in leadership, we'll spend more time trying to mold them and make them right into the right thing than we will sitting down, having a difficult conversation, just saying, hey, I don't think you are a good fit for this role. And I've had that conversation with people and I've had them look me in the eye and go, oh my gosh, thank goodness. I'm so glad you said something, because trust me, if you're thinking that, they're thinking the same thing. And it's uncomfortable for them to come to you because then it's an admission of failure or it's an admission of guilt. Like, I'm trying to do this thing and I realize I'm not a good fit. And so I think it's really, really important when we're talking about what is a difficult conversation. You have to be effective. You have to take the time to be thoughtful. And if you really care about the person, sit down and have a very straightforward and direct conversation. Again, not out of malice, not out of hurt, not out of pain, not emotionally driven, but just being able to look at someone saying, hey, you're not a good fit for this role. And here's the difficult thing. I'm not saying if you're married or you have children and so forth, but that happens in our personal relationships. If you're dating or you're with our spouse, sometimes it's hard to sit down and look them in the eye and say, hey, gosh. And I'm not saying, when I'm saying this isn't a good fit, I'm saying, like my wife and I, for example, we've been together for 21 years now, almost. My gosh. And so that's one of the things that, of course, we run into situations that sometimes it'll be like, hey, this isn't the right direction. And one of us has to speak up, right? And so it's very important to be able to do that. And I think I danced around this some, but here's a really direct way. I said what the solution is just address challenges head on with empathy and clarity and maintain a healthy team dynamic or a healthy relationship dynamic. And I think that's one of the most valuable things we can do. Hey, well, I'm part of the way through the show. Here's a couple of things. Remember, I do go live each Wednesday here at 12:05. In most instances, I have a guest. I've had a couple here where I'm recapping, like this week. We're going through these 5 leadership pitfalls that can absolutely derail your team. And so I'm just drawing from some of the most recent conversations I've had, because we spend time leaning in and talking about, what are the wins? What are the good characteristics? What are the 5 traits of a good leader? What are the first things you would do when you take over that will help move a business forward? We're talking about things today that of things you need to be conscious of and things that you need to develop. And if you see that you're falling into one of these pitfalls, how to fix them. So make sure you tune in each week. Again, it's theleadershiptoolkit.com. I'm live here at 12:05, and then I share the show every weekend or every week. My goodness, sometimes I'm stumbling over my own words today. Each week I share after the live show on Spotify and Amazon Music and every place that you listen to your podcasts, Apple iTunes, and so forth. So we've covered the first 3. What are these 5 leadership pitfalls? 1 is the lack of communication, lack of clear communication. 2 has been the failure to truly delegate and let people take on their own processes and their own autonomy. 3, avoiding difficult conversations. We just got done having that conversation, because that in itself can be hard, right? The 4th one we're talking about today is lack of accountability. And again, how the one of the things that's tough is it becomes a buzzword, right? Well, you got to be accountable. Got to be accountable to the person. I got to hold myself accountable. Well, how the hell do you hold yourself accountable? What is accountability, first of all? And this is one of the interesting things. We've been talking about this some in our men's group at church. There's been a series on this. And it's accountability is the obligation and willingness to take responsibility for your actions. It's doing what you say you will do, right? That's first, doing what I say I'm going to do. Second part of accountability is truly taking responsibility and owning what are the outcomes. What if I did this thing and I said I was going to do this thing? What is my outcome? And it's win, lose, or draw. And you can look at it a few different ways, right? When we're talking about accountability in its own right, you can look at a couple different things. One is when I'm talking about outcomes, I can say, hey, I won at this thing or I lost at this thing. I succeeded at this or I failed at this. And I think that's most commonly how people determine what's an outcome. What's the result I got? Did I win or did I lose, right? Well, the reality, and again, my background is sales. So let me give you an example. If my goal is to sell 20 widgets or 20 cars or 20 new clients this month, then the win is selling 20 or more of X, right? If I don't sell 20, then most people go, well, that's a loss or a failure. I go, well, I only sold 15. If I only sold 15 new clients, or I only sold 15 cars, or I only sold 15 widgets, then we start saying that. And even as I'm saying it now, you hear that and you hear the justification. Well, I only sold X. So there's a couple ways to look at it. One, and one of the things that I always look at, you have to own that outcome. What did you do that led to those 15 units that you sold? I have to look at that. That is the reality. I have to own that. The actions and the attitude that I had leading up to that is what led to that outcome. Secondarily, one thing that I would encourage you to reframe is, you succeeded in selling 15 units or 15 clients or 15 of whatever. So what did you do that allowed you to enjoy that success of those 15? Because that's repeatable, right? So if I look at what did I do that helped me succeed in making those 15 sales? What did I do that helped me succeed in this outcome? You sort of reframe the win and loss. You sort of reframe the success and failure piece. And so one of the things that to realize, that's starting with yourself. Well, it's the same thing when you get into managing and leading teams, is how do you define that accountability? First off, I think it's really important you go back to number 1 is you got to have good communication. I have to be able to communicate and come to agreements with the people that I'm leading and managing. And so when I'm talking about accountability, when I'm talking about team accountability, right? Not oneself. If I'm talking about myself, it's doing what I say I'll do, own the outcome. Well, how you create team accountability is through those conversations and agreements. You manage people through agreements. Hey, Mike, we had this conversation last week. You said you were going to sell 5 units. You said you were going to sell 20 units. You said you were going to accomplish completing this Excel spreadsheet, whatever the thing is. If I have that conversation and the person says, yes, I agree to do that. Hey, here's what we need done. Yes, I agree to do that. And the person agrees to it. Now you can manage the agreement. That's how you create team accountability. Without that, you lose direction, you lose commitment. Because if I'm just constantly barking at you, if I'm telling you, well, this is what we're going to do, the unfortunate piece of that then is it's still my accountability. It's my direction. It's my goals. It doesn't create ownership with my team. If I'm just giving you the directive, or I'm saying, hey, this is the, and there is a time and place, we could dissect that when it comes to leadership. There's a time and a place for the leader to be out front and say, hey, charge, this is where we're going. But also when we're trying to get people on board on a team, whether it be, I'll use another example here is that like the football team, the high school football team. My oldest son played high school football, loved it. We were really good high school, football parents. We're good gymnastics parents. We bring that cheering to the field or to the meets. And so one of the things that happens so often, like in football, you've got the coach over on the sideline just yelling, oh man, we agreed to this, because the coach laid out the plays, right? You're supposed to execute on the play that the coach laid out. That's the leader. Well, you're supposed to do this. Well, most people, when you're on the field, when you're in the game, when you're in the moment like that, you're not paying attention to the sideline. You're not paying attention to that stuff. Here's the play I have to run. What's more powerful is when that leader on the field, when that quarterback looks at you, when we've had that conversation that here's the agreement, I'm the QB, you're the lineman, you're going to block for me, and then you're going to run right? We have that agreement. I can manage that agreement because I can look at somebody and say, man, I'm getting my butt kicked over here. Play your position, play your role, hit the block, right? And so when you have that buy-in and that agreement and that commitment, then that's one of the things that allows you to hold team members accountable. Is I've had that conversation with people and they said, yes, I'm going to do the thing. They have that self accountability. And that allows me then to look at them and say, hey, you said you were going to do this, then do it, execute. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that's in a high level leadership role that would question or say, oh, well, gosh, I don't know, that seems too harsh. No, if somebody told me they're going to do something, I expect nothing more or less. Go do that thing. Right. And so I think that's something that can absolutely destroy teams is when we're not having those conversations, we're not creating team accountability. You have a complete lack of accountability, a lack of ownership in your workplace or your leadership environment. You're doomed to fail. Right. The next one that I have, this is number 5 on the list as we go through today on the Leadership Toolkit. What is one of the pitfalls that will absolutely be damning to your leadership? And that's resistance to change. And that's for self and for team. And so the problem is so often we cling to the status quo. We cling to what we know. We live in the comfort zone. We bathe in the light of what is comfortable because I've experienced some wins there, right? And so first off, like each of these others, as we've talked about, I looked up, well, like what is change? How is it to be a change agent, right? And change is the process of becoming different over time. That's it. Simplest, most distilled form. Change is the process of becoming different over time. And that's whether it's in your thoughts, your behaviors, your systems, your actions, your attitude. I use actions and attitude a lot, right? Whatever it is, all it is I'm starting at this space and I'm moving over here. Change says that I have to become different. Here's the irony of this. So often we look at change or being a change agent is I have to improve or I have to become better because that's assuming that's all where we want to go. I want to move from this space and I want to become better than I am now. I want to become more effective than I am now. And what has to take place for that to happen? Well, we have to change. We have to change one of those things. We have to change the way we think. We have to change what we're studying. We have to change the things that we do. But the reality is it's simply becoming different. Because when we get out of our comfort zone, there is no guarantee that that change is going to be a success. And let me say that again, because sometimes that's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow. I think I'm going to move from here to over there, right? And that's going to be better. But sometimes it's not. And the only way you will know that is if you do that. You have to be willing, and you have to be a little bit fearless, maybe be a little bit. I remember watching a video from Steve Jobs years ago when he's like, hey, listen, the people that are doing these things, you got to be a little bit crazy, because if you weren't, who would pick up and do these things? People that really make a difference in the world, people that are those change agents, that it requires you to be adaptable and resilient and plan and look from different angles. We can't always be looking this one direction. Maybe it does require a little bit of, that risk factor, does require a little bit of craziness and willingness. But I'm going to say that again, that I went back to, is change is simply the process of becoming different. And yes, we do hope different is better, right? We do want to move forward. We do want to move closer to the goal, or to what our purpose in life may be, or what we believe and have success framed as. Do we want all those things? Yes, absolutely. What do you have to do to get that? You have to be willing to become different. And when you realize, because there's going to be times that doesn't work. It's going to be times it doesn't work on an individual basis. There's going to be times it doesn't work as on a team level. If you realize it's not working, then it's okay to go back to the place. And then what do? You start doing those things. You start planning, you start plotting, you start getting an idea, you start looking at what other people are doing, what other businesses are doing. And you say, okay, well, I went this way and maybe that didn't work. So I'm going to come back here to home base because I already know this thing is working. But now we're going to go this way because I still got to become different. I still got to move. I got to be able to change. And so when we cling to that status quo, when we stay here, the problem is not that we go out here and fail. The problem is that we never try, right? Problem is that we stay here at home base. Well, I'm comfortable here, so that's where I'm going to chill. And so, what is the solution? And I think the solution, when we're coming at it from a leadership view, is we need to foster an environment and a culture of innovation, of just continuous, constant, and never-ending improvement. I remember when I was training, back, this is 20 years ago now, we had a Suzuki franchise, and one of their commitments was Kaizen, right? Or Kaizen, which is like that constant and never-ending improvement. That was one of Suzuki's mantras. And they're still a huge global brand. Well, I know they're not here in the US. It's do all kind as far as light cars. But that Kaizen, that constant and never-ending improvement, you as a leader are helping to foster that environment and that culture. You as a leader are saying, and how do you do that? First and foremost, it's like anything else. It starts with you. I have to be willing to be different. I have to be willing to take this chance. And I'm not saying make an uneducated or uncalculated chance. I'm just saying take the chance. When people see you doing that, and I wrote this down. This is another church thing. I wrote it down. When people are watching all the time, right? Other leaders are watching. Your business peers are watching. Your family's watching. Your kids are watching. Your spouse is watching. Other men are watching. Other women are watching. People are watching to see what you are going to do, and not just what you are going to do, but how you react. How are you going to react in the wins? How are you going to react when that change works, right? And I had someone say this to me recently, like, what if it works? Well, if it works, then you do more of that thing, and then you continue branching out and changing and keeping moving. What if it doesn't? I'm telling you right now, if it doesn't, and I started to make that difference, I started to move, I started to adjust, and it doesn't work, my stance is it is okay to come back to home base. It's just not okay to stay there. I've said that to my kids for years, right? We learn from the past, we don't live in it. And so it's one of those things. We learn, we move, we come back, we move. Oh, hey, this thing worked. Now we have a new space to move from. Now we're going to move over here, and we're going to keep on growing and consistently and constantly pushing and growing ourselves. How do we bring in new information? How do we adapt, right? And so how can we change? Don't be resistant to change. So I'm going to recap that for today's show. Couple things. First off, thank you everybody for tuning in and listening to this episode of the Leadership Toolkit while we're talking about 5 leadership pitfalls to avoid, because these 5 things will just absolutely kill your leadership. They'll kill your team. They'll kill your business. And so I appreciate you. Do me a favor, if you would, you can check out this live show every week at live.theleadershiptoolkit.com. You can check out all the other episodes at theleadershiptoolkit.com. You go there, share it with a friend. I will tell you, if you didn't take notes today, I'm going to give you a quick recap, and I would encourage you to go back and listen, because while these are things that I've listened to, and through years of expertise, I've compiled this and said, okay, this makes sense. This is stuff that came from quite literally interviews with over 100 leaders from all different verticals of business, and they intersect. And so while we talk a lot on this show about what are the wins, how do I win, how do I move forward, what are the good characteristics, these 5 things will kick you right in the teeth. And so I'm going to recap that right now. Number 1, we talked about lack of clear communication. Number 2, and how do you communicate better? Develop transparent communication channels and ensure expectations are clearly articulated. Make sure we go back and forth, have that 2-way dialogue. 2, failure to delegate, right? We just don't do that. I think sometimes we don't do it well because we want to have it close to the vest, and we all try and accomplish that ourselves. The solution is just empower your team by assigning the responsibilities to them that align with their strengths, and then let them do it. Number 3, we said avoiding difficult conversations, right? It's hard when things are emotionally charged, when they're uncomfortable, when we know somebody well enough to know this might hurt their feelings. And so what's the solution to that? Just address the challenges head on with empathy and clarity. I said that before. Just look them in the eye, make sure they know you care, and have that direct and clear communication with them. Number 4 was lack of accountability. And how do you hold people accountable? Manage through agreement, right? Establish clear goals and hold team members responsible for what it is that they're contributing and what you agreed to. If they agreed to that with you, it's fair to say, hey, you agreed to this. And number 5, resistance to change. That I spent some time here just now talking about this, but that is one of the things that absolutely kills leadership. It kills innovation in business, is when we want to stay and live where we're at. What's the solution to that? Cultivate a culture that embraces innovation and constant and never-ending improvement. You're the tip of the spear, leaders. So you have to lead by that. That's what we're talking about when it's leading by example. Be willing to cut through to those next things. So that's my message today on the Leadership Toolkit. I appreciate you all so much. Again, do me a favor, please. If you would check out the show on many of these podcast platforms, you can go and check out theleadershiptoolkit.com. As I say each week, as I share each week, certainly please give some thumbs up on the show. Like that's awesome. That's one of the ways that the show grows, is through you sharing this show directly and liking the show on whatever platform you may be listening to it on. Most importantly, and one of the reasons that I share this, is if there's one person out there today that could hear this message and go, man, I really needed the confirmation of that, or gosh, I do that and I need to correct it. Or if you're listening and you go, hey, I know someone that needs to hear this, please share the show with them. Please. That's one of the best things that you can do for somebody else, and be able to directly impact your circle and help to grow your influence and your leadership. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today on the Leadership Toolkit. I look forward to seeing you next week. Tune in 12:05 Mountain Time at live.theleadershiptoolkit.com. We'll talk to you soon, everybody. Have a great week and stay great.